Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. We're going live today. And folks, I apologize for maybe not the most scenic setting today for the live stream. I'm on the road. I'm in a hotel conference room. Surprise, surprise. You probably captured that vibe as you first saw me here, giving you the greeting. But I'm here filming an incredible show, a State of the Nation town hall. Now, I'm here in the United States, of course, the state of my nation, the United States. Even though we have viewers from around the world watching right now from every continent, events that unfold in the United States will impact, much like events that unfold in the Middle East, as we tell you here on the Watchman Newscast on a regular basis. Things happening here in the United States will affect you and will affect the world no matter where you live. So we're putting together a town hall with a live studio audience called State of the Nation 2024, and especially in an election year. This is going to be a tumultuous year, not only around the world, but I fear right here in the United States. I don't fear. I shouldn't say that. The Bible says we're not to have a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Let's just say there is some healthy concern about where the nation is heading, and we're going to break all of that down on this town hall special here in Nashville. We're going to film it tomorrow. It airs on January 23rd. More on that to come. You can mark your calendars. But in the meantime, yes, you're not here for the bells and whistles. You're here for the content. So I know you'll forgive me for coming to you from a conference room, but we've got a lot to talk about, folks, on this Monday. It was a very busy weekend in the world's most chaotic, most volatile, most strategic region, the Middle East. So let's break it down. Number one, the breaking news today: a U.S. cargo ship was attacked by Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis. Now, last week here in the newscast, we reported on Friday, and then again on Saturday as well, there were joint strikes carried out by the U.S. and the U.K. in Yemen, targeting those Iran-backed terrorists, the Houthis. This terror outfit has been launching attack after attack over the past few months against commercial vessels in the Red Sea. Now, some 12% of the world's commerce and goods pass through the Red Sea. So obviously, this is unsustainable. Something needed to be done about the Houthis in Yemen. A first step, long overdue first step, as we broke down last week, by the U.S. and U.K. on Friday. But now the Houthis have responded. And folks, they don't seem very deterred. We want to tell you what happened and what comes next. In the meantime, just a quick reminder: if you have not subscribed to the Watchman News channel right here on YouTube, hey, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Things are happening so fast, it can sometimes be hard to keep track. So we want to be your one-stop shop for everything happening, in particular in Israel, in the Middle East, but also China, Russia, Europe. What about the rise of AI, this great reset movement by some global elites as well? A lot to talk about, a lot unfolding, including in my nation right now. And by the way, snow coming down here in the South, in Nashville, about 5 inches right now where I'm coming to you from. So interesting times for sure. But with the Yemen attack today, the Houthis have not remained silent. The U.S. says, and the U.K., that the airstrikes conducted, again, the joint strikes late last week and over the weekend, were highly effective, and basically that they established their objectives. Now, in particular, they're striking sites from where the Houthis would launch rockets, missiles, and attack drones. So the U.S. and U.K. are saying, look, we were successful. But secondly, they're saying we need more targets, meaning the Houthis, it's kind of a hit and run operation. It's guerrilla style, where they can fire rockets, fire drones, and then they clear the premises. They're out of there. So I think the challenge for the U.S. and the U.K. right now is first to find the right sites where they could really hit the Houthis and hit them hard and really set them back. The Houthis said that last week 6 people were killed, 5 more injured in those strikes. But I think secondly, is there the will? And that's been the question all along. It took so long. It took companies like BP and Maersk saying, hey, we're not going to use the Red Sea. We're going to go around Africa and we're going to, in essence, we don't want to, but this is going to impact global trade and the global economy. Why did it take week upon week, weeks for the US, for the UK, for the West to finally step up and do something about the Houthis? So you can see why the Houthis and their masters in Tehran, the Iranian regime, are saying, you know what, the US, UK, okay, show of force, but there's no will for a sustained conflict against the Houthis. And by sustained, I don't mean an invasion of Yemen, not what I'm saying. And I shouldn't even say sustained. I should say a decisive campaign against the Houthis, where the Houthis are hit and they feel it. I compared it to 1986 when the Reagan administration struck Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. He didn't rear his head for many, many years in any sort of major way after that strike, which left a mark. Let's just say that. This doesn't appear to be the kind of strike which has deterred the Houthis or their masters in Tehran. And here's the details about what went down today. Just going to read you the specifics straight off my phone here. Bear with me, folks. Okay. The Houthis launched an anti-ship ballistic missile today towards shipping lanes in the southern Red Sea, and it struck a U.S. cargo vessel, a U.S.-owned cargo vessel. This was not a U.S. destroyer or military ship, although, by the way, worth mentioning, the Houthis also launched a missile yesterday at a U.S. destroyer in the Red Sea. So again, they are undeterred, let's just say that, and more force is needed to send a decisive, definitive message and to completely discourage the Houthis from ever doing this ever again. That hasn't come yet. And this is similar. We saw strikes last Friday. And on one hand, you say, okay, bravo, finally the US and the UK did something. But on the other hand, you have to look at Iraq and Syria, where sparingly from time to time, the US has reacted against those Iranian-backed militias there after dozens upon dozens of attacks against US bases in Iraq and Syria. Finally, sporadically, every few months, the US will respond with some airstrikes. Clearly not enough to deter the Iranian regime or its proxies there. And it seems to be the same case in Yemen. Now, this cargo ship was struck, and it was a Marshall Islands flag, Gibraltar. It's called the Gibraltar Eagle. It suffered a fire on board, but no casualties, thank God. And U.S. Central Command says it remains seaworthy. Quote, according to the U.S. military, and Iranian-backed Houthi militants, or terrorists, I'd call them, fired an anti-ship ballistic missile from Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen and struck this U.S.-owned ship, cargo ship, the Gibraltar Eagle. It reported no injuries or significant damage, and it is continuing its journey. And the Houthis vow that they're going to carry out continued military operations targeting American vessels. And the beat goes on, folks. The UK says that it has assessed the attack today, and it targeted, obviously, U.S. interest in response to U.S. military strikes on Houthi military positions in Yemen. So the U.S. and UK, they see what's going on. And look, after the strikes last Friday, they anticipated a response from the Houthis. But folks, the mere fact that you are anticipating any kind of meaningful response from the Houthis shows you probably didn't hit them hard enough. Now, again, I'm not talking about an invasion of Yemen. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about precision, or perhaps you do want to put special forces on the ground for pinpoint strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen along that coast. Perhaps you do. And I'm sure that's being discussed. But again, the question is, with this administration right now in the United States, the Biden administration, is there teeth behind the muscle flexing? Look, there's U.S. destroyers in the Red Sea. Is there the sense among America's enemies, and enemies of the free world for that matter, that there's real force behind the displays of power? I think that's a big question. And that's certainly a question the Houthis continue to challenge. The Houthis aren't backing off just yet. So I think that's going to be, folks, going ahead and moving forward, that's going to be the big question. Is there the perception, and in the Middle East, oftentimes perception is key. Is there the perception that the U.S. is in it to win it, so to speak, when it comes to the Houthis, that the U.S. is willing to take the measures needed to decisively send a message to the Houthis, and again, by extension, the Iranian regime? Because right now, the Iranian regime, through its proxies, continues to probe and continues to press, even after last Friday, as they've done in Iraq and Syria for the past 3+ years. So it's going to be key going forward to have a forceful response that sends a message. But again, folks, as we move on here, I'm just not certain. I mean, and let's just say I'm leaning towards, I'm not confident that this administration in Washington right now is willing to do that. I think what they did on Friday was they carried out some strikes, then they crossed their fingers and said, hopefully this is it, and the Houthis now behave themselves. Well, that's not going to happen. And if they're not met with force, they will be increasingly bold. So, and no one is warmongering. I see people throwing that around. No one wants a full-scale war in Yemen or a ground invasion. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is all of us watching right now, I mean, before we do the simplistic warmonger rhetoric, all of us watching right now are profoundly affected by what's happening in the Red Sea. Again, I repeat, some 12% of the world's trade and commerce travels through this very vital and strategic waterway. You can allow the Houthis to continue to essentially conduct piracy and shut it down and affect global trade and commerce, where we will all feel it, no matter where you're watching from right now. We will all feel it. And you can also, by extension, allow their Iranian masters to grow more bold, and you can allow the Houthis to continue to launch projectiles at Israel and broaden the war in the Middle East. You can do all that, or you can respond with decisive force and send a clear message that this will not be tolerated. That's not warmongering. That's common sense. And if you let it go and you let the situation just continue to unravel, then you'll have a real war on your hands. So just to lay that out there. But speaking of war and rumors of war, and obviously there are multiple fronts in Israel right now. And we've talked about this on Newscast, and I am in a hotel, so apologies for a bit of the background noise. Again, this is kind of low tech today, but I wanted to come to you because we do have breaking news, not only what happened with the Houthis, but also in Israel today. We've talked about multiple fronts, and we've talked about not only Gaza, of course, we've talked about it because Israel's talking about it. Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, has said, look, we're fighting a war right now on really 7 fronts. Not only Hamas and Gaza, but the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Iran. And I added an 8th front last week when we talked here in the newscast, the diplomatic front. Certainly a front, the anti-Israel measures at the UN, the International Court of Justice, and elsewhere. But Israel itself was part of the front today, near the Mediterranean Sea, not far from Tel Aviv, in central, kind of north central Israel, in the town of Ra'anana. There was a deadly terror attack, folks. I'm very sad to report this for you, but today in Ra'anana, 2 Palestinian men, now they traveled from Hebron, more south of Jerusalem, up towards the Mediterranean coast to Ra'anana, where they carried out a joint attack using cars, car rammings, and stabbings. Now, at least one of them was apprehended and interrogated. I want to share with you what he shared in his interrogation, just so you know the absolute evil Israel is dealing with right now. I want to share some of the quotes by this terrorist from his interrogation. But real quick, folks, one person, a 79-year-old woman, an elderly woman, was killed in this terror attack. At least 17 more people were wounded, some seriously. Now, I mentioned the stabbings. There were car rammings as well. Again, 2 terrorists. And they used apparently 3 separate cars to do this. They'd hop in, they'd ram some people, they'd hop in another car, then they'd hop in another car and carried out these lethal attacks. This is the state of play right now in Israel. This is what Israel is preparing for on a daily basis. And the concern was throughout that eventually in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and these terrorists came from Judea, they came from Hebron, that there would be more rising up as well. And look, the IDF has conducted many raids since October 7th in Judea and Samaria, arresting terrorists. Over 1,000, if I'm not mistaken, have been arrested. Now, this quote is very eye-opening, folks. Just so you have it, I'm going to pull it up and just quote directly here. And here we have it. One of the terrorists who was interrogated today said, quote, this is Israel's Channel 12, published this quote. It's from the Shin Bet, Israel's internal intelligence service, a Shin Bet interrogation of one of the suspects in today's Ra'anana terror attack that was ostensibly leaked by the Shin Bet. The terrorist said, quote, and folks, really wrap your heads around this. When the war in Gaza began, my cousin and I decided to carry out an attack and become martyrs, his word. We got a ride to Ra'anana from Hebron 3 days ago. Our plan was first to stab Jews. Then we decided to run over as many Jews as possible. This gives you the demonic mindset of the terrorists that Israel is facing right now. This was premeditated, cold, and calculated murder, intentional against Israeli civilians, just as October 7th was. This is what Israel is facing right now. This is no time for a ceasefire. That's not warmongering to say that. To use that term again that's been thrown out. You don't agree to a ceasefire with genocidal forces who want to wipe you off the map, with a demonic death cult. No, Hamas is an evil, I mean evil, that needs to be decisively crushed. It's going to take a while. It's not going to be pleasant. No one likes to see it. But here's the alternative to that. Much like the alternative to not acting against the Houthis at all and sending a message there, the alternative is Hamas will become emboldened, just like the Houthis are right now. They will continue to press. They will look to duplicate October 7th, many magnitudes worse. We know because they've told us that. We've highlighted clips and quotes from Hamas leaders in the wake of October 7th who've said, hey, we want to do more of this. So if Hamas is left alive and kicking to fight another day, guess what they're going to do? They're going to attempt to duplicate October 7th or massacres even worse than that. Not only that, the Iranian regime, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the militias in Iraq and Syria, the Assad regime, they'll be emboldened. They'll feel empowered to strike at Israel. They'll smell weakness. They'll smell blood in the water. And the United States, where I'm coming to you from right now, will also be seen as weak, because if a ceasefire is agreed to in Gaza prematurely, the entire world will know it was the United States that pressured Israel into agreeing to a premature ceasefire. So bad options there all around. And there is continued debate and discussion inside Israel's war cabinet, according to reports out of the region, where there are some in the war cabinet who want an extended ceasefire so that hostages can be released. Everyone wants to see the hostages come home. We continue here in the Watchman to pray for a miraculous hostage rescue, and we'll continue to do that. We've compared it to Genesis 14, where Abraham and his men tracked down his nephew Lot, who'd been kidnapped by these pagan northern tribes, Canaanite tribes, and rescued Lot. We've compared it to David and his mighty men rescuing their wives and children who'd been kidnapped, by Israel's enemies, as laid out in the book of Chronicles, First Chronicles. So there are biblical precedents for that miraculous rescue operation. We are praying for that once again. We want to see the hostages come home, some 130 at least, still held in Hamas captivity. But what do you think? And Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, have apparently said, no, we're not doing that. We can have a ceasefire, because the only thing Hamas responds to is force. And the harder we hit them, the more willing they will be to give the hostages up. What do you think? Does Israel continue to press the issue and continue the offensive? It's almost defensive in that Israel is responding to what happened on October 7th. Hamas launched a war against Israel on October 7th. Do not forget, this is Israel's response. What do you think? Is this a time to pause? I personally don't think that it is, folks. As badly as I want the hostages to come home, it doesn't seem like a time when Israel's making such progress and really devastating Hamas. It doesn't seem like the time to pause, and perhaps even Hamas leaders are able to escape. But what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts here. We've got a very active chat going on right now. Also wanted to mention in northern Israel yesterday, January 14th, we had a deadly Hezbollah attack. Now, we've been telling you now for months, since October 7th, really, to watch the north. As bad as Gaza is and as intense as it has been, it's nothing compared to what will happen in the north when, not if, Israel goes toe-to-toe with Hezbollah. Now, I want to tell you about what happened yesterday, but also, and why it could have a profound impact in the north and that coming Great Northern War we've talked so much about. But a reminder before we go on that there are some 80,000 Israelis who have evacuated their homes in the north, not to mention hundreds of thousands in the south near the Gaza border, of course. Folks, they've been relocated. They're in hotels. They're in shelters. They haven't been home in months. Their kids are not able to go to school in many cases. Israeli society right now, in case you didn't know, is in complete upheaval, is the best way I could put it. Not upheaval in terms of, look, the people are united and they are united in the mission, but upheaval in terms of it's chaotic. You have close to 300,000 Israelis have been called up for reserve duty. I have good buddies, and I've talked about it here in the newscast, who have left their families, their wives, their kids, and they're on the front lines. And these are guys in their 40s in some cases, who are feeling the creaks. I have some texts with some friends in the IDF. We joke a little bit. They're feeling it a little bit more than they did when they were 20 years old. No surprise there, but they've answered the call, and they are defending the world's one and only Jewish state because this is an existential struggle. People keep asking me, how can I help? People watching, how can I help Israel right now? And these evacuated communities, people who don't know what the next day will bring, quite literally. It's upheaval is the word I would use again. And I keep telling people about my good friends at Mer Panim. Now you can go to mpgive.org. That's mpgive.org. Mer Panim is an incredible Israeli humanitarian organization which is helping Israel's most vulnerable. And right now, certainly, that includes evacuees. They're providing hot food, hot meals, warmth, shelter, comfort. Mer Panim across the board is really doing God's work. I believe in this organization because I've seen it on the ground with my own two eyes, shoulder to shoulder in Israel. I have even fed Holocaust survivors with Mer Panim. They're doing, again, God's work for such a time as this. And I strongly, strongly encourage you to check Mer Panim out and lend them your support. Hey, the Bible is very clear, and I believe there's a biblical mandate laid out in Genesis 12:3 to bless the people of Israel. I'm going to do exactly that in any way that I can. And Mer Panim, as you're asking, how can I help? mpgive.org. Great way to get started in helping the people of Israel. You can tell a lot about someone, or I should say, you can tell who your friends are, your true friends are, when the chips are down. Well, folks, right now, this is the most intense, most problematic, most troubling period for the nation of Israel, perhaps since its modern miraculous rebirth in 1948. So Israel could use a few good friends right now, and Mer Panim is certainly doing just that, mpgive.org. Now, along that border yesterday, 2 Israelis were killed, Israeli civilians, by a Hezbollah anti-tank missile that struck their home. A son and his mother both died, both murdered by Hezbollah terrorists, and their father, the husband, father, was seriously injured as well, reportedly. So The beat goes on in the north, where Hezbollah has now killed several IDF soldiers and several Israeli civilians. Folks, I can tell you that if Gaza was not happening and Hezbollah had tried this, then Israel would have already been at war with Hezbollah and responded with overwhelming force. If Hezbollah, look, Hezbollah, and I have the numbers here that I want to break down for you in terms of what Israel has faced in the south and the north. These numbers are very enlightening, folks. Hold tight. I'm going to break these down for you. Got them right here in terms of the barrages against Israel. First of all, some 9,000 Hamas terrorists, 9,000 Israel believes have been killed since October 7th. So the IDF certainly making a major, major dent in Hamas's capabilities and their foot soldiers, no doubt. We've had Saleh al-Aruri a few weeks ago, eliminated, top Hamas leader, several Hamas commanders eliminated. So Israel making headway. So 9,000, the IDF estimates, Hamas terrorists have been killed since October 7th, since Hamas launched a war against Israel, invading southern Israel. Secondly, Hamas has launched some 11,000 rockets from Gaza. Some, the bulk of them, I think 9,000, the IDF said, have reached Israel, but many thousands more, have fallen inside of Gaza and most likely killed some Palestinian civilians. Hamas's own rockets that didn't reach over the border into Israel, but fell inside of Gaza after they were launched. Secondly, Hezbollah to the north. Now we move to the north. Again, these numbers are important for you to know. Hezbollah has launched some 2,000 projectiles, the rockets, missiles, drones, anti-tank missiles against Israel. 2,000 since October 7th as well. Look, Hezbollah also launched a mini war against Israel the day after October 7th. Again, Israel in both cases, folks, was the victim. In both cases, Israel did not seek out a war. On both cases, a war was imposed upon Israel by Hamas and by Hezbollah. Now, the situation to the north, but folks, 2,000 projectiles launched by Hezbollah. If Gaza wasn't happening, this would never, it would already be a full-blown Great Northern War. And Israel is striking deeper in Lebanon and with greater intensity. And we've documented over the past few weeks how Israel has made major headway in eliminating some top Hezbollah leaders as well. But it would not have been allowed to reach this point in the north if Israel was obviously not very distracted by what's going on in the south. Israel does not want to fight on multiple fronts, in full-blown confrontations on multiple fronts, but a multiple front war is upon Israel. And although that northern front's not all the way open yet, it will be. And when the dust settles in Gaza, eventually it's going to take a while, and perhaps before the dust settles, I believe you're going to see Israel act against Hezbollah in a more forceful way than it has thus far to completely change the game on the Israel-Lebanon border. Now, the ultimate goal is to push Hezbollah back beyond the Litani River, which is some 18 to 20 miles north of that Israel-Lebanon border. In the meantime, Israel, and this has not been reported much as the world's attention is focused on Gaza so much, Israel has killed several pivotal Hezbollah figures from the elite Radwan unit, which is based on Israel's northern border on the Lebanon side, of course. So this is all building between Israel and Hezbollah. I've called it the Great Northern War that's coming, where Israel will be forced to face off against Hezbollah, their masters in Iran, and various jihadi allies in Lebanon and in Syria. And will the Assad regime throw its hat in the ring? And when we talk about the prophetic, are we seeing the stirrings of Isaiah 17, which talks about the end of Damascus, which talks about Damascus, one of the world's oldest inhabited cities, being uninhabitable, ceasing to be a city? Isaiah 17. Are we seeing the stirrings of this as we look at this Great Northern War? Certainly the groundwork's being laid, I believe, for the war of Gog and Magog, Ezekiel's war. So the prophetic chess pieces as we move into 2024 are moving on the board right now, folks. Fasten your seatbelts, no doubt. I don't know how long Israel can wait with Hezbollah to act decisively against Hezbollah, as again, 2 Israeli civilians murdered by Hezbollah terrorists yesterday, adding to the list. Northern communities, 80,000 gone from their homes up north. What would you do? We've asked this many times on the newscast. How can you go home? If you're one of the residents of those northern communities, how can you go home near the Lebanon border if Hezbollah is still perched, staring across the fence at you at full strength, with every desire to top October 7th, in their view, top October 7th. So it's unsustainable. It can't go on. Israel must act and change the equation, the so-called status quo along the northern border, especially now when you have hundreds of thousands of Israeli reserves called up. The nation's on war footing. It's united. This seems to be the time to deal with Hezbollah and change the equation there. What do you think? Is it time? As we go here, and in advance of tomorrow's newscast, and again, if you're just joining us, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, a snowy Nashville, Tennessee, some 4 or 5 inches where I'm at right now, preparing to host as I come to you from a humble little office in my hotel, little office space here, preparing to host State of the Nation 2024, a TBN town hall. It will air on January 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Mark your calendars, January 23rd, 8 p.m. Eastern time. But I will come back to you tomorrow and we will have another update. I don't know where I'll be, in a hotel, in the studio, someplace, but I'm sure things will continue to develop in the world's most volatile and chaotic region over the next 24 hours. So in the meantime, think on that, and we'll chat again tomorrow. But can Israel wait? How much longer can Israel wait with Hezbollah? And how can Israeli communities in the north return to any semblance of normalcy if Hezbollah is still there staring at them at full force? I don't believe they can. And I believe ultimately the more those communities in the north and the south are essentially evacuated and emptied, that's going to start to have major ripple effects on Israel's economy. Think about it, pray about it. Thanks so much for joining us here today on the Watchman Newscast live stream. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.